The term hotspot is used by rail enthusiasts to identify places where one can experience large volumes of traffic. These are often junctions or diamonds where tracks converge. Hotspots can also be historic or highly scenic places. However, it's stretching the point to expect that trains passing through one of these revered locations will actually be on fire. This awesome display of pyrotechnics is caused by a blown turbocharger on the locomotive's diesel engine. A rich mixture of fuel is being released out of the exhaust stack, igniting into a ball of flame. The spectacle is enough to scare man and beast alike as the train spews fire and sooty clouds of black smoke in its wake. We'll be visiting locations throughout the states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Although the drama won't be as intense as this train's passage through Alliance, Ohio, there'll be plenty of big-time Conrail action observed at important junctions around the Midwest. We'll begin by following the Chicago line west from Ashtabula across the state of Ohio. Stops will be made at places such as the Cleveland Drawbridge, Berea Tower, and Vickers Crossing at Toledo. In the state of Indiana, we'll visit Elkhart, South Bend, Porter Junction, and the Amtrak station at Hammond. Returning in an eastward direction, we'll follow the St. Louis and Indianapolis lines back across the Midwest. Illinois stops will include St. Elmo and Effingham. Visits to Indiana locations will include Haley Tower at Terre Haute and the junction with Norfolk Southern in Muncie. Returning to the Buckeye State, we'll conclude our Midwestern tour with stops at Ridgeway, Marion, Gallion, and Crestline. To wrap things up, we'll then return to our starting point at Alliance, Ohio. All aboard now, we're ready to explore destinations across mid-America in Conrail Hotspots West. The town of Ashtabula is located in the northeast corner of Ohio near the Pennsylvania state line. It's an important Lake Erie port where Conrail handles large volumes of both iron and coal. We'll be setting up at the junction where the tracks of the railroad's busy Buffalo to Chicago main line meet the Youngstown line and the track coming up from the port. Early morning action gets underway as a Buffalo to Pittsburgh freight approaches the junction. The train will be switching onto the Youngstown line and heading south. It'll need pushers to get up the grade leading away from Lake Erie. The heavy freight rolls off of the water level route and onto the secondary main. These cars of scrap iron are probably headed to one of the remaining steel plants in the Pittsburgh area. Two pusher engines come into view as they shove hard, helping the train maintain momentum over the grade leading away from Lake Erie. Milepost 0 marks the beginning of the Youngstown line. Numerous trains polish the diamonds of the Chicago line, Conrail's busiest route. The railroad maintains a yard just west of the junction. The two helper engines return now and come straight across the diamonds, headed for the docks down along Lake Erie. Several minutes later, an eastbound freight is seen approaching the diamonds at Ashtabula. Chicago Northwestern and Union Pacific diesels pull the train today. The symbol indicates that this freight is operating from North Platte, Nebraska to Selkirk, New York. The trip between Nebraska and Chicago was made over the Union Pacific system and helps explain the foreign power. The train is hauling a long string of cars loaded with rolls of coiled steel. Behind these loads are a string of empty containers used to haul trash. These containers are being returned to the Northeast, where they'll be reloaded and once again sent to Midwestern landfills. The two locomotives used earlier as pushers are now seen pulling a heavy train of iron ore pellets away from the dock. Flanges squeal as the heavily laden hoppers are led through the curves and onto the Chicago main. The train will travel west to Cleveland and then switch onto the Cleveland line to head south through Alliance. At Yellow Creek, the train will be routed over the river line to Mingo Junction. These pellets are destined for the furnaces of Weirton Steel at Weirton, West Virginia. As the heavy hoppers continue to roll by, a burro crane passes over the diamonds on the south track. Pushers are needed to lift ore trains up the grade leading away from the dock. A 4-unit set of helper power comes into view as the train conquers the hill. The train slows and will be stopping. The helpers have done their job and will be cut off the train now. Later, a local freight returning to the yard comes across the diamonds. In downtown Cleveland, the busy Conrail main runs along the city's lakefront. The tracks cross over the busy shipping channel of the Cuyahoga River on this lift bridge. An eastbound is heard approaching, and we're surprised to see that 6 locomotives are leading the Elkhart, Indiana to Selkirk, New York freight. That's an unusual number of engines for the easy grades along this route. This part of Cleveland is called the Flats, and it's become the hub of the city's revitalization. Nightclubs and restaurants flourish along the river. In the background, Terminal Tower can be seen standing tall over the city's other buildings. A barge is slowly moved along the river and will pass under the raised Conrail drawbridge. Gulls swarm behind the tug, hoping to catch anything edible that the boat's powerful screws kick to the surface. The bridge is controlled by an operator inside the tower that's located here. Once the barge is clear, the span is lowered into place. It's a slow process that takes several minutes to complete. Soon after the tracks have been aligned, another eastbound shoots across the span. Conrail train TV100 operates between Chicago and Boston. A small boat is waiting to get upriver, but the Conrail operator has one more train to run before once again opening the lift bridge. Horn blaring, the Buffalo to Elkhart freight rouses the gulls as it comes across the bridge. Just as soon as this train has cleared, the small pleasure boat will be permitted to pass upriver. However, we won't wait for that to happen and move to a location on the western outskirts of Cleveland. Berea is a major junction on the Conrail system. Westbound traffic may continue on the main toward Chicago or split off for Columbus, Indianapolis, and St. Louis to the southwest. Trains headed east toward Pittsburgh are often routed around Cleveland on a track that bypasses the city called the Short Line. Located in the middle of this important junction is Berea Tower. It remains in operation due to the heavy amount of traffic that passes through here. A Triple Crown road railer is the first train encountered upon our arrival at Berea. This train operates between Crestline, Ohio and Rochester, New York. Shortly after the road railer has disappeared, a westbound Pittsburgh to Elkhart freight is seen coming past the tower. Track work is being done just west of here on the Chicago Main, and all trains have been issued slow orders. A wide view shows how the lines converge on the west side of the tower. Several minutes after the freight has cleared, a westbound intermodal train arrives at Berea. It too has caught the slow order and eases past the junction. The stacked train operates between Kearney, New Jersey and Chicago. It's time for an eastbound, and Mail 8 is switched off the main onto the track that bypasses downtown Cleveland. The long string of piggyback cars makes its way through the junction from the Chicago line and onto the short line. This train operates between Chicago and North Bergen, New Jersey, via Pittsburgh and Harrisburg. As the sun lowers in the western sky, it casts a warm glow over the scene. A Selkirk to Avonard freight will be switched onto the Indianapolis line for the trip down through Crestline and Galion. From there, it'll head west through Marion and on across Ohio to Indiana. The cars flow off of the Chicago main as they pass through the switch. Rounding a curve, the train passes onto the Indianapolis line to complete its trip through the Berea interlocking plant. The operator has had another busy afternoon, but isn't finished yet. As the sun sets over northern Ohio, one more eastbound passes through the junction. TV 590 drags its string of double stacks under the signal bridge toward its destination of Croxton Yard in northern New Jersey. The tall sets of double-stacked containers play hide and seek with the setting sun. As the last car passes through Berea, we see that the train is being crossed over to the north track. Time runs out on us, however, and we won't have light to view any more trains passing through this vital Conrail junction. The next day finds us further west on the Chicago Main Line, set up along the shore of Lake Erie at Port Clinton, Ohio. The busy Chicago Main passes over another drawbridge here. Commercial boats don't pass through this inlet, but large pleasure craft could require the bridge to be opened. A westbound is heard coming and seen sprinting across the causeway and over the bridge. Symboled the LMST, this train is traveling from Linden, Metuchen, New Jersey to Sterling Heights, Michigan. It's transporting empty auto parts cars back to Detroit factories from Ford assembly plants in northern New Jersey. A few minutes after the westbound has disappeared, an eastbound pig train is seen gliding along the rails. This is train TV 100, and it's powered today with a couple of Union Pacific units. Across the bridge now, the two locomotives throttle up to bring the train back up to speed. Westbound PIBR is headed from Pittsburgh to the Belt Railway of Chicago's Clearing Yard, located south of Midway Airport. The train is pulling a large cut of cars destined for the Burlington Northern. Moments later, another westbound appears. This drag freight is headed to the large classification yard at Elkhart, Indiana, and originated at Buffalo, New York. We don't have to wait long for one more eastbound to roll along the water's edge. It's a Toledo, Ohio to Metuchen, New Jersey freight. The first part of the train is made up of general merchandise. The last half is carrying automobile parts in oversized boxcars and finished product in the enclosed auto racks. As the last car crosses the bridge, this brings our visit to a close. Continuing with our westward progression, the next venue is located at Toledo, Ohio. We've selected Vickers as a place to represent the area. Toledo is a bustling railroad city, and this is one of the busier places where trains of Conrail, CSX, and even the Grand Trunk can be seen. The diamonds are located at mile 285. No tracks connect the two railroads here. It's a simple crossing, but it's a busy one. Our day gets underway as Amtrak's westbound Lake Shore rolls through the scene. The rising sun gleams off the shiny cars as train number 49 rattles across the diamonds. A short time later, a set of light engines appears at the signals. The Union Pacific Power will be waiting here until an eastbound intermodal train has passed the crossover switches. TV10's cars pound the diamonds and shake the earth as they roll by. In the meantime, the UP SD60M waits its turn. After the intermodal train is clear, the dispatcher gives the light engines permission to come east. The units will be crossing over onto the south rail and then going into the siding to pick up a train of loaded coal hoppers. Later in the afternoon, the sun favors the south side of the tracks. We've changed our position to take advantage of the good light and watch as TV7X comes across the plant. The first part of the train is made up of double stacks, but the bulk of the train is composed of pigs from different shippers. TV7X travels the line between Boston and Chicago. The X indicates that this train is an extra section of TV7. Soon after the last car rolls across the diamonds, CSX gets into the act and sends a northbound through the junction. The train is pulling a high and wide load directly behind the locomotives. The car has been placed at the head of the train so the vigilant crew can keep their eyes on it. Grand Trunk operates into CSX's Walbridge Yard located just south of here. A typical assortment of their GP38s is found on the northbound train today. Common power for the trunk. As the freight continues to rattle across the diamonds, a CSX train passes in the opposite direction. After both trains clear up, Conrail again gets into action and runs a westbound through Vickers. The Union Pacific SD40 is a former Missouri Pacific diesel. Seeing locomotives from other railroads is a common occurrence now and can no longer be considered the oddity that it once was. Our afternoon at Vickers comes to a close, and we'll move on now to destinations further west. In the state of Indiana, our first hotspot is located at the city of Elkhart. Conrail has a huge classification yard here. In keeping with our theme, we'll pass over that facility for the trackside action through town. There aren't many places as nifty as Elkhart when it comes to great train watching hotspots. Here you'll find everything. Jake's Restaurant and the New York Central Railroad Museum are located alongside the tracks across from the passenger station. The museum features both outdoor and indoor exhibits of New York Central equipment and artifacts. This steam engine is one of their most prized possessions. From the restaurant, trains can be observed from the deck, or if one prefers, from inside the observation car that's been converted into a diner. Here we see train ML 441 arriving from Detroit. You'll be welcome to spend time here as long as the restaurant isn't crowded. The food is good and the staff understands rail fans. Be sure to try the great pancakes if you come for breakfast. Mornings seem to be the busiest time on the railroad. Relocating outside, the long string of auto racks continues to roll past Jake's, and the deck provides a great place to observe the action. A Santa Fe train has arrived and pulls down past the yard. It'll be backing up once it clears a switch. This train operated over the Santa Fe to Streator, Illinois. There it got onto Conrail and traveled through Kankakee and then north to the Chicago Main. The train then traveled east to its terminus here at Elkhart. A short time later, a Pittsburgh to Elkhart train arrives and pulls past the restaurant's deckside viewing area. Steel coils make up a large portion of this train's cargo. Both the new style and older model coil cars are found on the train. A 5-platform set of empty spine cars brings up the rear of the train, and the empty cars allow us to view the station as they pass by. The museum also has a deck for fans to use, and it provides a slightly different angle of the station. Train ELFW heads out of town on its afternoon run to Fort Wayne. The train operates push-pull style with a locomotive on each end. There's no provision for turning trains at Fort Wayne. In order to speed up the switching process, Conrail has found it easier to run with power on both ends. South Bend is located just 17 miles west of Elkhart. The tracks are elevated through town and therefore present a problem for fans. However, just west of the downtown area, Arnold Street crosses the tracks at grade and provides access to the area's best train-watching location. Conrail was busy rebuilding the track at the time of our visit, and the area looked somewhat in disarray. There were still plenty of trains passing through here, and Arnold Street remains a great hotspot. A belt railway of Chicago to Selkirk train rumbles through the junction on its way to Elkhart. The train has already been classified, so it won't be yarded there. A fresh crew will take over and the train will head east, passing through all the locations that we've just covered. The track to the right brings trains of the Grand Trunk Railroad through South Bend. They operate through town over Conrail's line. A westbound comes around the bend, heading away from downtown South Bend. The train's on its way from Elkhart to Indiana Harbor Belt's yard at Riverdale, Illinois. A long string of coiled steel carriers and freight of all kinds are found on this transfer to the Chicago area. A self-propelled crane comes past the junction, returning from its day's work further out the line. As the sun drops low in the sky, another westbound rounds the curve and heads our way. A Conrail lease unit leads another BRSE through South Bend this evening. Most of this traffic arrived at Clearing Yard from the west on Burlington Northern and Southern Pacific trains. The freight cars will now travel to points in the northeastern part of the country over Conrail's network of tracks. A Pittsburgh to Proviso Yard train makes its way out of South Bend as the last rays of sunlight illuminate the scene. Proviso is the former Chicago Northwestern Yard located west of Chicago. These two engines are returning on a train that will soon get them back to home rail. Shortly after sunset, Grand Trunk finally gets into action and sends an eastbound through the junction. For the past few hours, the railroad had 3 trains sitting at its yard just west of here, all waiting for crews to come on duty. Of course, nothing moved until the sun went down. Sometimes that's just the way it is. Bad luck this time. The tail end of the Conrail train passes as the trunk cars continue to file through the junction. Moments later, the last car comes around the curve and passes through the switch. Another fantastic day of rail fanning Conrail Chicago, Maine comes to an end. The next day finds us waiting for action at Porter, Indiana, 42 miles west of South Bend. This is a very busy junction where Conrail's main is joined by 3 other lines. Merging from the northeast is CSX's track coming down from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Their trains utilize several miles of Conrail track before getting back onto their own rail. Amtrak's privately owned line from Battle Creek also joins the Chicago Main here, and they operate over Conrail most of the way to Union Station. The third line is Conrail's Porter branch. It departs the main here, running directly to Indiana Harbor Belt's Gibson Yard at Hammond. Conrail calls this important junction CP 482. An eastbound is seen approaching in the distance. When the 2 locomotives get closer, you'll see that these same 2 units were on one of the trains we saw at South Bend. It's common for Conrail to keep diesels in captive service, making transfer runs between Elkhart and Chicago area yards. The Clyde Yard to Elkhart transfer meets Amtrak's Capital Limited, now operating with bi-level superliner cars. As the last cars of the BNEL pass through the junction, we once again sneak a look at the Amtrak train. A few minutes later, a local freight makes its way through Porter. The local is operating with a caboose, a rarity on the main line these days. local is being powered with one of Conrail's GP15-1s. The railroad has a total of 100 of these low horsepower diesels, and the engine is working in the exact type of service it was designed for. Amtrak train number 351, the Wolverine, arrives at the junction. The train operates across the state of Michigan from Detroit to Chicago. These trains run push-pull style, with the cab car always headed toward the Windy City. The train files through the junction switch and then crosses over onto the middle track. A Selkirk, New York to Belt Railway of Chicago freight passes through Porter and is being crossed over all the way from the north to the south track. On the day we visited Porter, the north track was out of service west of the junction. Several minutes later, another passenger train arrives. It's the International, a jointly operated Amtrak and Via train that runs between Chicago and Toronto, Ontario. The train crosses the border at Port Huron, Michigan. Action is heavy at Porter, and no sooner than the Toronto-bound train clears, we hear the horn of a Santa Fe to Elkhart freight coming off the Porter branch. The Conrail locomotives on this train have made a complete round trip over the Santa Fe out to Kansas City and back. As explained earlier, these trains get off of Santa Fe track at Streator, Illinois, and run across Conrail's line through Kankakee. The line comes north at C.P. Schneider to connect with the Porter branch at Gibson. We hope that this short visit to Porter leaves you with the impression that this is a very busy junction. However, the railroad has been concerned with the number of fans congregating here over the years. They will not tolerate a group of people hanging out on railroad property. Please accept this notice as fair warning not to trespass. All of our shots were taken from public property. Our next venue takes us to Amtrak's passenger station at Hammond, Indiana. This location is on the Chicago Main, just a mile east of the Illinois state line. Although many Conrail freights have switched onto other routes before they reach this location, there's still plenty of traffic through here to make this a hotspot. Amtrak alone sends a total of 14 trains a day through Hammond. The station is a modern building, purpose-built to handle a large volume of traffic. It's located at milepost 507 along Conrail, Chicago, Maine. The International has pulled in for its daily stop and is ready to depart for Toronto. The current arrangement for this train's operation sees VIA providing the locomotive and Amtrak providing the cars. In years past, there have been other agreements. A local freight backs toward us along the south track on its way from switching a local refinery. Once again, we're pleased to find a caboose on the rear of the local. A long string of tank train cars are on this train. These cars are interconnected with a large diameter hose between the tops of the cars. This connection permits loading and unloading of multiple cars through just one hookup. A 1969-built GP38 shoves the string of cars west into Coal Yard. A westbound empty coal train comes past the station on its return trip to the Union Pacific. The train will be going back to Wyoming for another load of western coal. Amtrak's Lake Shore arrives at Hammond and will be making a quick stop at the station. A mixed consist of Amfleet and Heritage cars makes up this New York to Chicago train. A Boston section joins the Lakeshore at Albany, New York. Train 49 is ready to depart, and we watch as the long passenger train heads on toward its final destination of Chicago, 16 miles from here. Running along the other side of the station are tracks belonging to the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern. One isn't likely to see anything operating here, but today we got lucky. An inspection train makes its way along the poorly maintained right-of-way. A U.S. Department of Transportation inspection car is checking on rail conditions. Our visit to Hammond comes to a close as Conrail sends an eastbound BNEL past the station. These trains operate out of BN's Clyde Yard, located in the town of Cicero, just west of Chicago. We'll depart the Chicago Main now and reverse our direction of travel across mid-America. Our tour will follow the St. Louis, Indianapolis, and Fort Wayne lines in an eastward direction. Hotspots along this busy corridor in the states of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio will be visited. In Illinois, we'll start at the small town of St. Elmo and then head east to Effingham. Locations in the state of Indiana will include Terre Haute and Muncie. Ohio hotspots visited will include the busy Conrail junctions at Ridgeway, Marion, Galleon, Crestline, and Alliance. St. Elmo marks the end of several miles of joint operations between Union Pacific and Conrail. Looking east, we see the point where 3 tracks funnel down to 1. Just behind us is a switch that carries the Union Pacific line in a southern direction. Conrail train TV55 arrives at the junction and will be switching off onto Union Pacific's track. Four LMS lease units pull the train through the turnout. The Conrail crew will operate only as far as Salem, Illinois, 29 miles to the south. From there, a Union Pacific crew will take the Cleveland train to its final destination of Dallas, Texas. The tail end passes through the switch, and now the entire train is on Union Pacific track. About 15 minutes pass before another Conrail train is heard, and we watch as train Mail 3X scoots through St. Elmo on its way from South Kearney, New Jersey to East St. Louis. A short time later, Conrail operates an East St. Louis to Indianapolis train through St. Elmo, symboled the ASIN. The AS indicates that the train originated at the Alton Southern Yard. Two of Conrail's newer SD60 wide cabs power the train today. The term wide cab is rather odd. It's become an industry-accepted description of these style locomotive cabs, but the fact is they are no wider than the older type. It's the nose of the units that's actually wider. Wind whips across the Illinois prairie as Union Pacific train SHCH comes across the Conrail main. This symbol indicates the train is operating from Shreveport, Louisiana to Chicago. The train will take the next switch and will run down the middle track to Altamont. That's where Union Pacific tracks curve to the north, departing joint operations with Conrail. A former Missouri Pacific SD40-2 leads the train, and it got us to thinking, just how many SD40 and SD40-2s does Union Pacific own? The answer? A lot. They probably still own over 1,000 when former Chicago Northwestern units are included in the total. "17 miles east of St. Elmo, the north-south Illinois Central Main Line crosses over Conrail at Effingham, Illinois. This city of over 11,000 people has always been a busy railroad town. A beautiful passenger station is located at the junction of the two railroads. An IC local rumbles across the diamonds on its way north to work local industries. Conrail identifies the junction as CP140. It doesn't take long for Big Blue to run a freight through town, and we watch as train ASPI comes past the station. The long train bangs across the diamonds in a rhythmic beat. Freight of all kinds makes up this East St. Louis to Pittsburgh train. Four passenger trains stop at the station on most days. These are the northbound and southbound runs of the city of New Orleans and the Illini. Train 392, the northbound Illini from Carbondale to Chicago, is seen arriving at Effingham. The train is being pulled by one of the Genesis AMD 103s. Soon off for points north, the General Electric's throaty exhaust is music to our ears. Conrail gets back into action and sends a Pittsburgh to Houston train through town powered with an all-UP diesel lash-up. Train TRIN is next across the icy diamonds. The train symbol indicates that it's operating out of the Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis, Granite City, Illinois yard. The train is headed to Avon, Conrail's large classification yard located west of Indianapolis. We can't depart Effingham without viewing at least one IC freight come through town. A couple of recently acquired SD40-2s, obtained from the used locomotive market, lead a southbound freight across the double-tracked Conrail main. Terre Haute, Indiana is located along the western side of the state bordering Illinois. It's always been a railroad town and holds on to that tradition today. Lines of CSX, CP America, and Conrail pass through town. At Haley Tower, it's possible to see trains from all these railroads. The tower is still in operation as this junction remains a busy one. Morning light favors the scene, and we've set up just after sunrise to capture the morning action. TV 55 comes past Haley on its daily run. This is the intermodal train that switches onto UP Rail at St. Elmo. It's interesting to note that the TV-55 we saw at St. Elmo had LMS engines on it. Perhaps there's a pattern here, or maybe it's just a coincidence that today's train is also powered with an LMS unit in the lead. A northbound CSX train surprises us by being switched onto Conrail. Quickly recovering, we set up on the sunny side of the tracks to catch the run-by. After CSX chose to abandon its former Monon route north of Bedford, Indiana, they obtained 33 miles of trackage rights over Conrail. This gets them over to Greencastle, Indiana, where they return to their own rail. This train will then head north to Lafayette, its destination. A few minutes later, we catch another Conrail westbound. Mail 3X comes past the tower on its run to St. Louis. The X indicates the train is an extra movement. Once the junction is clear, CSX returns to action and sends a southbound pig train across the diamonds. The tower operator is kept busy today, and before long, Conrail sends another westbound through town. Conrail's TV symbol comes from their term for piggyback trailers. They call them trail vans. A cut of double stacks is located toward the rear of the Boston to East St. Louis train. We notice that the operator has once again aligned the switches for a movement onto CSX and watch as a southbound comes back onto home rail after a trip across Conrail from Greencastle. Our visit to Haley Tower is complete, and we'll jump now to the other side of the state. At the city of Muncie, Norfolk Southern's line between Cincinnati and Fort Wayne crosses over Conrail's double-tracked Indianapolis line. The NS track runs parallel to Conrail for a short distance and then comes across the line at a diagonal. Eastbound NLPI operates from Union Pacific's North Little Rock, Arkansas yard to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Conrail symbols indicating Pittsburgh actually mean Conway, their immense yard located along the Ohio River 22 miles northwest of the city's downtown. Norfolk Southern actually has two diamonds in Muncie that cross over the Conrail main. The busier of the two is in the foreground, and a local freight is seen crossing over the other one in the distance. This is the former nickel plate line to Lafayette that runs through Tipton and Frankfort. Shortly after the NS local clears the junction, Conrail local WSNA 82 rolls through town. The Winchester and Western cars have brought in sand for Ball Glass, one of Muncie's largest industries. Train INPI blows for the many street crossings as it comes through town. Watch for the Alco switcher located behind the Conrail locomotives. The Bay Colony S2 was shipped out for repair work and is now being returned to its owners in Massachusetts. The short line operates over several old branch lines in the state and out onto Cape Cod. A few minutes after the eastbound clears, Conrail treats us to one more movement. A westbound Pittsburgh to St. Louis freight pounds across the Norfolk Southern Diamond. The local freight can be seen in the distance, working on the siding. Norfolk Southern finally gets into action by moving us southbound through Muncie. Train 197 operates between Detroit and Chattanooga, Tennessee. One doesn't normally see open racks headed into the interior of the United States, but these cars remain fairly common across Canada. The train's last car rattles the diamonds, and with its passing, we'll move on to locations further east. The next venue takes us to the Buckeye State. Ridgeway is located about 50 miles northwest of Columbus. It's a busy junction where Conrail's Indianapolis Main is crossed by the Toledo branch. The line south to Conrail's Buckeye Yard is called the Scotts Lawn Secondary. This busy and important Conrail junction is called CP 124. A blustery wind whips across the central Ohio plains as a westbound Pittsburgh to St. Louis freight rushes past the junction. Looking south, a Columbus to East St. Louis train is seen approaching the junction. It'll be taking the connecting track to the west and then crossing over to the north or number 2 track. The tail end swings off the Scotts Lawn Secondary onto the connector. The name of this line comes from the Scotts Company located at Marysville, Ohio, famous for their line of lawn care products, grass seeds, and fertilizers. The wind continues to whip across the prairie as the end of the train crosses over to the number 2 track. An Indianapolis to Columbus train is waiting at the signal for the COAS to clear. When it rains, it pours. Looking north, we see that a southbound has arrived on the Toledo branch. The INCO has its signal now and proceeds onto the connector track. This will take the train south onto the Scottslawn Secondary for the trip down to Buckeye Yard. As the last car clears the main, the headlight of another eastbound train can be seen in the distance. East St. Louis to Harrisburg-bound TV4 pounds across the diamond with punishing blows. The track is designed to move, but there seems to be more action here than necessary. If the plant didn't flex, it would actually cause excessive wear to both the rail and to the wheel sets. Looking north again, we see that another southbound is coming down the Toledo branch. Before either one of these two trains can come across the diamonds, they'll have to wait for another eastbound move. Mail 44 shakes the ground as its intermodal cars zip through the junction on their way from East St. Louis to South Kearney. Now that the Indianapolis line dispatcher has run all trains in the vicinity of Ridgeway, the first of the two southbounds is allowed to proceed. An Elkhart to Columbus freight eases ahead and will come on across the diamonds. A couple of SD50s get the long train underway. We don't have time to wait for the other southbound, but we can tell you that it was a Toledo to Columbus freight. As you can see from our morning here, Ridgeway is a very busy junction where it's possible to see plenty of Conrail action. One of Ohio's busiest railroad towns is located just 23 miles east at Marion. If it's variety that you desire, then Marion is the place to be. Both Norfolk Southern and CSX have double-tracked main lines that cross Conrail side by side. A beautiful old station sits right between both lines, and until recently, the junction was controlled by a very unusual-looking tower. As you might guess, Marion is a magnet for fans from this part of the country. The tower is no longer in use, but will be saved. A group of local fans operate a railroad museum at the station, and they plan on having the tower moved to the other side of the tracks. Fans anxiously await the next train through the plant and are rewarded with the arrival of a Conrail local. 30 minutes after the local passes the station, a southbound Norfolk Southern train bangs across Conrail. Late afternoon shadows are growing long as Conrail train PIHO comes through Marion. Norfolk Southern sends another southbound across the Conrail main. Just as soon as it's out of town, the railroad runs a northbound coal train past the tower. Things have been unusually quiet on CSX's old Chesapeake and Ohio track, but a northbound coal train changes that. The long string of loaded coal hoppers is being pulled by a single AC 4400, testimony to the locomotive's low-speed lugging ability and power. Moments later, CSX runs a southbound empty coal train across the Conrail main. Conrail gets back into action as the last rays of sun fall across this active hotspot. 5 units pull a Selkirk to Indianapolis train across Marion's quadruple set of diamonds. It's a pleasant surprise as we turn in time to catch eastbound train INPI round the distant curve. Conrail has waited for the last minutes of daylight to put on a show for us at Marion today. A spectacular show indeed. Two Union Pacific SD40-2s follow a Conrail SD50 across the diamonds. The deafening noise caused by two trains simultaneously pounding the diamonds is music to our ears. Galleon and Crest Line are only 5 miles apart. At Galleon, the Columbus Line joins the Indianapolis main after a 58-mile run north from Ohio's state capital. 5 miles north of Galleon, the Indianapolis Line crosses over the Fort Wayne main line. Traffic to Pittsburgh takes a connector track onto this line and heads east. Traffic for Cleveland, Buffalo, and Selkirk continues north to Berea Tower on the Indianapolis Line. At Galleon, Mail 4 comes through the curves as it heads east with its intermodal cargo of mail and United Parcel Service vans. In recent pre-Conrail times, this was a junction between Penn Central and Erie-Lackawanna. Conrail has completely reworked the junction, and the EL track to the east has been removed. The tail end of Mail 4 comes past the Columbus Line switch. A few minutes later, we catch TV6 arriving at the junction on its northbound trip from Columbus. The cars flow onto the Indianapolis line as the train makes its way east. The train originates at East St. Louis and makes a stop at Columbus to pick up and set out cars. The train's destination is Boston. Flanges squeal as Mail 44 rounds the big curve at Galleon. If we had to pick a favorite location out of all the different Conrail hotspots covered, this would be it. Just call us suckers for big curves. The dynamics involved with the train passing through here is exciting, and the photo possibilities are tremendous. The only thing lacking is a high level of train density. In the afternoon, an LMS engine leads a Buffalo to Columbus train through Galion. Two Burlington Northern SD40-2s trail the Conrail power. Five miles northeast brings us to Crestline, Ohio. Once a bastion of the Pennsylvania Railroad, it's still a railroad town, but on a much smaller scale. Not much remains of the immense Pennsy-yard that was once located west of town. Triple Crown uses a small portion of the old Pennsy-yard at Crestline as an intermodal terminal. Train RR-232 departs for its trip to Rochester, New York. In order to get onto the Indianapolis Main, the train must first cross over it at the Crestline Diamond and head east on the Fort Wayne line to the connector track. After backing onto the Indianapolis line, the train will be ready to head north toward Berea Tower at Cleveland. The conductor is seen riding the special platform on the end of the train. He'll be responsible for protecting the rear of the train during the backup move. The train heads north now after backing onto the Indianapolis line. An Indianapolis to Pittsburgh freight arrives at Crestline. 4 units are on the train today, and the trailing one is a low-horsepower GP15. We speculate that it's being transported to Conrail's locomotive shop at Altoona. The freight cars glide off the Indianapolis Main and onto the Fort Wayne line in a smooth, effortless procession. Heavy loads of structural steel are found on the end of the long train. Moments after the INPI clears the junction, a special movement comes up the Indy line. On the radio, the crew refers to themselves as Special 601. A westbound is next to pass through Crestline, and the low sun illuminates the passing intermodal train as it rounds the curve coming off the Fort Wayne line. After passing through the connector switch, the train is crossed over onto the number 2 track. Closing the loop on this full circle tour around the Midwest, we return now to Alliance, 104 miles to the east. This important junction is where Conrail's Cleveland line crosses over the Fort Wayne line. The Cleveland line carries ore traffic from Lake Erie to mills located in the northern Ohio River Valley. The line ends at Rochester Tower, where it joins the Fort Wayne line just west of Conway Yard. Amtrak's Capital Limited stops here nightly, but only for night owls. Current schedules see the westbound here at 1:42 a.m. The eastbound train arrives at 3:27 a.m. A picnic table provides visiting fans a place to sit and enjoy the day as they wait for passing trains. This southbound is actually headed to Pittsburgh, but is being routed to Conway via the Cleveland line. The dispatcher has too many intermodal trains to run and doesn't want the freight to clog the main line. TV1 sprints through Alliance and will be switching onto the Cleveland line. These piggyback trailers are being hauled from Morrisville, Pennsylvania to Chicago. Morrisville is located across the river from Trenton, New Jersey. Mail 4 makes an appearance at Alliance as it races across the diamonds with its East St. Louis to Harrisburg-bound pigs. Shortly after Mail 4 clears up, TV3 rushes through town. This shows the dispatcher's expertise at getting hot trains across this section of single-tracked railroad. These cars are headed to East St. Louis from South Kearney. Alliance can be a hot location on Conrail. Mail 44 blasts across the diamonds, pounding the iron one more time. Speaking of hot trains, we've now come full circle and conclude with our opening scene of TV8 self-destructing. The scene is so hot, we're certain you won't mind viewing it again. Flames leap from the locomotive stack in grand finale tradition, bringing an exciting tour of Conrail hotspots west to a close.
Watch for more exciting programs from Pentrex.